Hey there. So I wanted to talk about the very interesting phenomena of personality disorder diagnosis, especially the ones that are more stigmatized than others, like psychopathy and narcissism, perhaps borderline. Because my own experiences of living through mental health struggles, feeling just very in a very general sense unwell, off, not connected to a greater sense of purpose or having self-esteem. So I feel like personality disorder, it's a very fluid category. And after years of studying this at university and reading self-help books and going to therapists and all kinds of coaches, both famous and little known, I'm not sure that I can generalize about this topic very well, except to say that if you feel like there's something wrong with you because you identify with the traits of a clinical diagnosis and some clinical well-dressed authoritative figure has told you that you have something that you need to fix about your brain, or there's something severely not wrong, but something that you need to change in order to be successful or be in a state of being healed, then I would say that you can safely drop that. Because the thing about knowledge is that it's all relative. It's all about consensus. It's all about what the majority believes. Scientific experiments are always biased toward the prejudices, the unseen blind spots of the scientist who is investigating these issues that they've actually use words to make up, and making up these concepts from a state of saying that there is such a thing as my mom. There was such a thing as good or bad when it comes to mental health, and without negating that there could be some truth in, not wanting to hurt other people or yourself in a very violent way. That's not preferable, but there's no absolute sense of evil or wrongdoing or unworthiness that that aligns to what I feel and have experienced and have felt a deep confirmation of as truth. So originally, 6 months ago, I was going to make a video about healing from personality disorders, and I thought that I potentially had, say, avoidant and schizoid, and possibly narcissistic, or perhaps OCD. And when I read those traits, it's like a loop, right? It's you have to first believe that they exist in you to confirm them. And I've had people from all kinds of walks of life, all kinds of degrees, say such different things about me, to me, about who I am and what traits I have. And it's just like, it's so like, I think at the end of the day, if you feel like you can find a therapist who understands you, who like you feel like you're being seen and you're being accepted and you're being loved and you're given advice that is empowering, and you need to be the judge, like you need to be the judge of what you deem to be empowering, because some people think that like someone telling them that they have a chemical imbalance, that there's a pill out there that can fix it, which by the way there isn't, that is that means that that's empowering, because it means that there's nothing wrong with them, it's just chemistry. But to me, that's actually very disempowering. Like giving you a lot of power away to biology to explain your behavior and to explain your your unwellness. And I feel like it's largely like it goes deeper than the very simplistic terms I'm using when it comes to animal parts and like emotional body, the mental body, the psychology, and perhaps, like if you're into spirituality, the soul or the spirit. But I have found that if you look closely at what you call personality disorder traits, that if you generalize, if you can see that it's all very like dependent on other people's opinions, and if you give your power away to a group of people who say that they've studied this extensively, then you can also consider how in past centuries, like the way knowledge has been established is always through the consensus of a majority, and that majority consensus is changing every single couple of decades, if not centuries, if not years, sometimes in our times, like sometimes months. So it's like a game of definition, or like what is really a victim, or what is a victor, like that kind of oppositional black and white kind of thinking is very painful and very stressful and extremely unproductive for almost everybody. So like if you, like there's a quote out there that goes something like, if you find an expert that tells you that what you're saying is not possible, then might as well go find another expert. Yep. And that's the thing, like you cannot be, or like I have still deal with this a lot, which is like thinking that because everybody is disagreeing with me on a certain issue, that could mean that I'm the wrong one, or I'm the bad one, or I'm being overconfident if I'm taking a risk or taking like a side sort of route that is risky. Either you could call it risky, like in a stupid way, or courageous, in another sense, or creative. So I feel like I can be on the margins of society in some ways, and do very creative things with it that others then come to recognize as wise, or as very useful or productive or true, after they've gone through a process of exploring their own, or what society says is right. And this has happened to me so many times that I feel more confident now that there's like, it's a it's a loop when you call someone a narcissist or like a borderline or like victim, perpetrator. Like everyone has every potential within them to be victim or to be perpetrator. And you or us analyzing ourselves, trying to assess where we are or whether we are good or bad, from a linear or logical perspective, is just not going to get us anywhere. And it never possibly will, because there's no such thing as someone who is too XYZ in, like, you can say overconfident, or you can say they have something, they're overreaching, or they think they're so great, but that comes from a sense of insecurity from the person who is making that judgment. And we're all constantly in like a multi-dimensional state of projection from and within ourselves to each other, from each other. Like it's not, everything is happening at the same time. There's no, it looks like paradox, but it's only a paradox if you define it that way. And you don't have to like see it as, you don't have to see it in such a negative fashion, in the sense that you don't have to be like, oh, you're either a perpetrator or a victim, or like you're either a victor or you're a loser. It's like, it's almost like unfair to everyone to say that we're all these very limited and definable, labelable beings because we're just a pattern of behavior, or like that someone has said is good or bad. Whether that's over centuries or over millennia, who cares? Because we don't know what the truth is, but we can start from the basis that life is somehow supporting itself through all of the centuries, through all of the ups and the downs and the chaos and the destruction, the seeming destruction and the rebirths of all these seasons of life, of humanity, of climate. And it is still sustaining itself, and there is some kind of supportive mechanism going on. You could call it a kind of intelligent compassion. I used to believe maybe it was evolutionary biology, but now I do believe there is, a very compassionate intelligence, guidance for all souls, all beings. So it's like, so every time you feel like your self-worth is under question because 10 million people tell you that there's something, like, that's not even a plausible scenario, but even if you were to say hypothetically 10 million people say that you are loopy, or you're narcissist, you're overconfident, or you're too shy, or you're too scared, or you're too whatever it is, to anything, insert any word, right? It's like, just consider the fact that the unit, like, there's, like, you can actually decide who you are. You can actually choose, like, your own self-concept, your own self-image, without the need to be received in a certain way, to have that validation or that safety through other people, or at least you can, as much as it keeps you, like, I guess, safe. You've got to have some boundaries sometimes in some contexts. But I found that, like, most people are not even as judgmental as we seem to think, because we're all, like, quite preoccupied with our own pursuits anyways, and we seem to have this thing where we're really scared that everything, like, how someone perceives us has anything to do with our worthiness or our success in a certain project that is designed for them. And it can take a long time for them to even, it can seem to not land, and sometimes it will land, and it will like plant a sort of it will take shape in their consciousness somewhere that at some point in time they will look at in a different way, and perhaps use in a way that is beneficial for that they feel is beneficial for them. And it can take a long time, so it can still be worthy to not give up on people, but not from a sense of needing them to love you more than they are willing to on a psychological level, because that's a very painful and unreliable source of fulfillment. Anyway, yeah, so it's very I feel like truth is just so context dependent. Like, say, for example, a narcissist. Is a leader a narcissist? Is Barack Obama too confident? What makes someone, what gives someone the right? Do they need 100 certificates? Do they need to prove something? Do they need to prove anything, any kind of competence or any uniqueness in order to justify a certain confidence, like in simply existing and having your needs met, even if they're starving on the street and the world seems to be going against everything they do? Like, do they actually need anything to prove that they have a right to be taken care of by life, if not by other people? And you can argue, well, you don't, if you're really demanding, and if there's someone who's an asshole who's really demanding, trying to violate your sense of privacy or your free will, then that's different. It's about in what kind of ratio or in what balance, in what context, right? It's not a black and white kind of assessment or a kind of principle that you follow. So yeah. And yeah, personality disorder, you can say that it is a thing, it is a solid thing, and that could be useful for someone if they choose for it to be useful for them. And in a sense, it's what it is kind of like a constellation of belief systems tied to emotions, thoughts, and behaviors that someone is choosing to embody, to express, to act on, but they weren't born that way. And it's we've all had times where we've had a violent change in our perspective after a series of events or a really profound lecture or something like that. And we feel like we're, even at least for that day or for a few months or years, we're a totally different person. Because what we identify as authenticity has so much to do with what we call consistency of opinions, which means that we actually encourage people to live in the past or live according to a label, live according to something solid to hold on to as a definitive signifier of what the core essence of that person is, which isn't the way we work. Our bodies grow, our cells shed every 7 years, and I'm getting into, you get the idea, right? So, even if you think that you've had a personality disorder for 30 years, that does not mean that those traits that you've carried for 30 years that you didn't have when you were born, that doesn't mean that they have anything to do with who you are, especially if they are causing you suffering. But yeah, if you are going to seek help, then my advice after all these years of being the giver and the receiver of advice is feel it out. If the person emanates a sense of love and acceptance without validating your sense of being someone who has been treated very unfairly, and there's no way out of your suffering except to keep validating the suffering or the sense of injustice done onto you by life continuously, because that's fake love, right? Because life is going to get harder and harder for anyone who holds on to an identity of being fragile or who needs everyone to take care of them. And there are exceptions for every situation. So I'm not the judge of whether maybe in certain circumstances it could be the most compassionate thing to do to hold on to a sense of victim identity. And I've certainly done that for what is many months, years at a time, for what it's worth. So even in very subtle ways or very obvious ways, I feel we can, there's a lot to be said for black and white self-development, tough love approaches where it's if you don't have what you want, it's because you don't want it enough, or it's because you actually want what you have, which is a kind of safety and staying the same and being validated for being someone who has been through a lot compared to some demographic. And yeah, so if we can have compassion for that, it's very, very needed, that there's compassion for ourselves and other people, because we don't know what is going on with others, and sometimes with ourselves. Sometimes we can be so harsh on ourselves and so horrible. But yeah, you're not trapped in a personality trait or a set of decisions that you made. I feel I've changed and grown and become different. And when I look back on the person that I was, what I'm really seeing is someone who just has so much self-doubt that she just gave all her power away to people who seem to have the answers. And so much fear of losing a sense of losing everything that she's worked so hard to learn, that then was revealed to be not beneficial or completely useless for the next transformation or the next step or the next stage of her evolution into her potential and her authentic self. So there's a sense of attachment to all the things that I've known. And in a sense, I felt I was giving up everything in order to make a leap, just based on the words and energy of people who seem to have made very similar transformations and healing journeys, but it's very much worth it. And it's a more stable form of happiness to be creative than to stick to stay in a state of, or like a perspective of disempowerment, even in a subtle way. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you've followed me to the end, that's, yeah. Thank you. Okay. I don't know how to, press this.